What's up, Acadamia? What if here to present you with what if Deku was betrayed and got Bond's abilities. Let's get into this. Currently, Izuku Midoriya is just now getting out of his bed in his dorm. He immediately starts stretching, but he feels quite odd. His body feels more relaxed, a little bit stronger. It feels more like he's more accustomed to his body. It feels odd, but he shrugs it off and thinks maybe One For All might have adjusted my body. After all, it's probably the only possible feeling, considering I feel a lot stronger. Maybe it's a side effect, is what Midori is thinking. He gets up out of bed, puts on his clothes, and is more ecstatic than ever, because his training is finally paying off, apparently. He walks towards the door, towards his dorm, and opens it. He immediately goes down the stairs from his dorm all the way into the kitchen. He starts to make breakfast for everyone in class 1A. He always does this as a routine. He makes them breakfast every single day just to get everyone's spirits up. So today he figured might as well do it special. He feels like he's forgetting something, and then he remembers, wait, today's my birthday. Maybe I should treat myself a little better today. He starts to make pancakes, eggs, waffles, sausages, grits, and muffins with some cupcakes. He immediately makes all of this for everyone in class, but he realizes something. No one's here. He swore that he put his alarm at 10:30 a.m., where everyone would usually end up getting up and getting dressed, eating breakfast, and be at school by 1 p.m. But for some reason, no one's here. It's quite odd. So he decides that he might as well go ahead and knock on all their doors. He goes all the way out of the kitchen after making breakfast and eating his portion. He walks all the way out of the kitchen and is walking down the hallway. While he's walking down the hallway to all the dorms, he starts knocking on each one. He knocks on Jiro's. Hey Jiro, are you in there? No one answers. And he just figures maybe she's either in deep sleep or maybe they all already got up. So he knocks on everyone else's door just to check. None of them have really responded. Last person that he knocks on their door is Mineta. He walks towards Mineta's room and he feels a little chill. He feels something wrong. He feels something ominous. It's odd. It's very odd. Doesn't feel right, is what he's thinking. He starts to mutter that in his head. His head is screaming alarms saying don't go near Mineta's room. But all Midori is thinking is maybe he's just up to some perverted antics again. I mean, I don't want to end up opening the door and see him masturbating to something. He immediately walks towards Mineta's door and he knocks on it. He taps it one time and slowly it starts to creak open. And he sees the room is completely dark and there's a horrible rancid smell that cannot be described from Izuku. He doesn't know what it is, but something's off. Something's very off. He immediately starts to walk towards Mineta's computer because he sees a chair and a yellow-gloved hand on the side of the office chair. He immediately walks a step forward and says, "Mineta, we gotta get to class. It's already 11:30. We're supposed to be there by 12. And he immediately gets no response. He takes another step in. He looks around and his eyes are starting to adjust to the dark. He sees red stains everywhere. He sees paint, hopefully paint, is what he thinks. He says, Mineta, what's that on the wall? When he sees something red dripping all over the wall. And he sees it all on the floor. He starts to take a few more steps towards Mineta, and he says, Mineta, please don't try to pull a prank on me again. He puts his hand directly on top of the chair on top of the office chair, and he spins it around and says, "I can't handle another prank." And immediately he starts to scream. He starts to have a panic attack after what he sees. He sees Mineta. Mineta was stabbed over and over in the chest with a horrible hole in his chest. He was stabbed all around his chest. He was stabbed in the head. His eyeballs are gone. His teeth are missing. And half of his jaw is just disfigured. It's terrifying. And Midoriya backs up very quickly, but he trips over something. He falls to the ground, and his hands are in some type of liquid, very warm liquid. And he picks his hands up, and he looks, and he sees blood all over his hands. Thick blood. He starts to shake, and he looks at Mineta, and he says, No, this cannot be happening. Who would do such a thing? While he's staring at Mineta, he notices that there's a hole directly in his chest. His heart's missing too. Immediately, he starts to back up. He starts trying to crawl away. Then he tries to pick himself up, but he hears something directly beside him. Right when he is in front of the door, about to leave and stand back up, he hears right beside the door, in the closet, he hears it creak open, and he sees an eye, a golden eye, slightly glowing. And immediately he starts to say, "Who's there? Did you cause this? Why would you do such a thing?" And before he could get up and defend himself or do anything like that, the person springs out of the closet, rushes towards him, and hits him in the back of the head. Immediately, he falls to the ground, looks behind him, and sees golden hair. That's all he could see before his vision blacks out. The stranger immediately walks over Izuku's body, opens the palms of both of his hands that were clenched, about ready to fight this person before getting knocked out, immediately puts in 2 items in his hand. And the figure who's a female, the silhouette immediately ends up disappearing from the scene while saying, "Happy birthday, Izuku. I got you something." And then walking out and turning directly into Izuku while walking out. Immediately, a few hours later, Class 1A has just walked into the dorm room. They're currently setting up for Izuku's birthday. They made banners and all of that inside of the Class 1A classroom. They had to leave very early to be able to do this. So right when they enter into the dorms, they're trying to figure out what to do now. They all got the presents and everything there. Now they just need to get Izuku to the classroom. I mean, it should be easy, but it's been an hour, and he hasn't showed up. And they're kind of getting worried. He's never late to class. So Ida immediately asks if everyone could search for him. Everyone does, but Bakugou and Kirishima notice that a certain grape pervert is not here. So they decide to go towards him. They decide to go get him first, to see if he has any ideas where Midoriya is. Once they all split up in different directions, they enter the dorm facilities just to see breakfast all on the counter. They immediately all rush towards the breakfast and start scarfing it down, while Bakugou and Kirishima merely just continue to look while everyone else is eating. As they're looking around and going to Mineta's room, they notice something. Right when they reach his door, they notice a terrible stench. It smells like something died. And they notice the door creaked open. Immediately, Bakugou and Kirishima's danger sense, their sense of danger from fighting villains from USJ and from Nomu attacks and all of that, is starting to kick in. Immediately, Bakugou kicks open the door and says, "Mineta, are you alright? Hey, great ball, answer me." His eyes have not adjusted to the dark. He takes a few steps and he feels a puddle at his feet. A warm puddle. He looks around and he sees nothing particular, since his eyes haven't adjusted. But then he hits the light switch right beside him. Right when the light starts to turn on, it starts to flicker. And for that brief moment when it flickered, Bakugou could see a dead Mineta on a chair with no heart in his chest. And multiple stab wounds, blood everywhere all over the walls. He immediately gets pissed off, while Kirishima is horrified. And Bakugou has this angry facade on, but on the inside he's terrified. No one should go through what the pain that Mineta's face shows. Mineta's face shows a sense of terror, of dread and pain. So do the dull eyes that are popping out of the skull. Bakugou immediately barfs, and so does Kirishima. But then they notice something when they're looking around a little bit. They notice that directly in front of them, on the ground, is Izuku Midoriya. They immediately go towards him and try to wake him up. He doesn't wake up until a few shakes later, and a few hours. Right when he wakes up, he immediately asks what happened. He ended up saying he had a horrible dream that Mineta was dead. Right when he opened the door, immediately Kirishima and Bakugou say, No. That's not a dream. He's dead, and you're the one that killed him. We know, because look what you have in your hands. Immediately, when Kirishima and Bakugou say that, and they ended up looking at Izuku's hands, covered in blood, so is his outfit. He sees in his left hand that there's a beating, not a beating heart, a dead heart in his right hand, and in his left is a knife. A knife with blood all over it, stained. And immediately, Izuku raises his hands up and says, Guys, you know that I wouldn't do anything to anyone in class. You know this. I would never harm anyone. I'd protect you guys. I helped you all at the USJ. I helped Ida. I helped everyone as much as I could. You've got to believe me. Immediately, Kirishima and Bakugou look at him. And Bakugou says, Oh, Izuku, I do believe you. Izuku calms down a little bit until Bakugou says, I do believe you did this. And immediately an explosion is sent towards Izuku's chest. He flies forward directly out of the room through the window in front of Mineta's dead body. Immediately outside the window, on the ground, feeling like he just broke his back. His bones feel like they just shattered from being flown all the way out of the dorm facilities from that explosion. And he immediately coughs up blood, and he says, I didn't do it. He just mutters that over and over, while Kirishima and Bakugou jump out of the window and land directly on their feet and walk towards Midoriya, and they start to beat him brutally, savagely. Kirishima starts hardening his body and punching Midoriya all over the stomach, the torso, the face, the legs. And Izuku's just screaming, I didn't do it, while Bakugou is scorching his body all over. He immediately tries to get up. Izuku tries to, but he gets kicked down by Kirishima and Bakugou. He's still on the ground bleeding. He's barfing up blood. He's saying in his head, I didn't do it. Why aren't they not believing me? Why? I know what I had in my hand. I know the evidence. But they should know me by now. They should. Especially Kachan. He knows me the most. We were childhood friends. After all. Immediately, all the commotion and all the beating caught the attention of all Class 1A, who immediately start to walk all the way outside. Right when they do, they see Kirishima and Bakugou beating the absolute crap out of Midoriya. Midoriya sobbing, screaming he didn't do it, while coughing up blood, while his body is bruised, broken, and many fractures on him that are even visibly seen, and some twisted bones from Kirishima twisting his arm around. Immediately, the class all ask Bakugou and Kirishima what happened. They tell them about what happened, and they go check, and they all have a horrified face. Some of the females are crying. Some of the other men in the class decide to go ahead and join in beating up Midoriya, and All Might, who was with the class, same with Aizawa, were both horrified at this, that a UA student would do this to another UA student. They were supposed to be heroes in training, for God's sake, not villains, is what both of them think in their heads. They let the entire class beat Midoriya down. Midoriya feels pain all over his body. Earphone jacks are stabbed into his skin. And there's a tail swinging around, hitting him in the face over and over by Ojiro. And there's Sero tying him up with a tape just to make sure he doesn't get away. But this doesn't stop Midoriya. He tries to get back up and tries to run. But right when he's able to get back up and they're not on top of him, all that happens is something that he didn't expect. All Might appears in his normal All Might combat form, his Big Might form. He is rushes right behind Midoriya and kicks the back of his knee so hard that it breaks. And he starts to fall and tumble when he was trying to run. He looks behind him and he just says, All Might, I know what this looks like, but believe me, I didn't do it. And All Might says, young Midoriya, I can't believe you did this. And Midoriya says, it's because I didn't. You should know, there's security cameras. Why don't you check them? And immediately All Might says, I don't need to check them. I can see in your eyes you're guilty. And Midoriya has cracks forming in his head. Tons of different cracks. Him being beaten by his childhood friend, crack. Him being accused of murdering Mineta, another crack. Everyone beating him down, another crack is forming. And they're getting larger. And his hero blaming him and saying that he did it when he obviously didn't, not even checking the evidence. These cracks are starting to form more and more often, and immediately Izuku just says, All Might, just get Nezu, just get him to look over the cameras. And All Might says, okay, young Midoriya, I'll do this for you, but if you are on the cameras, and you were leaving Mineta's room, or if you entered and left, didn't leave, I will beat you personally. I will beat you to the ground and make you regret lying to me about becoming a hero, about wanting to save people, when you just ended a life yourself, is what All Might says while walking away from Midoriya, who's still on the ground, bloodied and beaten, coughing on the grass, and immediately getting up with his broken leg and trying to hop towards everyone else just to get into the surveillance room that they're all heading towards. Immediately, he has to hop by himself. No one's willing to help him. He's having to hop, even crawl towards the surveillance room with them. Right when he makes it into the surveillance room, after a few minutes of them already being in there investigating by looking at the cameras, he immediately gets towards the surveillance room and pushes the door open a little bit and sees the surveillance cameras vividly show him entering and leaving. But then Midoriya says, that's evidence, because I never left. I was still in the room. And they immediately didn't believe him. They didn't say anything about it. They merely looked at Nezu and said, "Nezu, what's your course of action?" Nezu immediately said, "I say that we take him to Tartarus. After all, it seems that he might be the UA traitor, since he was willing to kill another classmate, and Moneta was focusing on scouting out the UA traitor. After all, he had various notebooks in his room. He may have acted perverted, but he was actually doing that to throw people off, to where they wouldn't know that he was investigating them." Immediately, Izuku says, "It wasn't me. I'm telling you, I'm being framed." While Nezu and all of them just look at Midoriya in disgust. Nezu tells All Might to take him away and put the quirk cancellation cuffs on him and go ahead and take him in an armored car that's going to transport him to Tartarus in a few hours. Immediately, All Might drags Midoriya off while putting cuffs on him. Immediately, Midoriya is begging All Might to listen, and every time he begged, All Might would just punch him in the guts, break his ribs, and cause the ribs to start puncturing his lung, unintentionally, mind you. But Midoriya would be coughing up blood in a coughing fit, but All Might didn't have any empathy for him, while he was dragging him all the way outside, waiting for the bus for Tartarus. Immediately, All Might said, "Give me my quirk back. You're not worthy to have it. You're not a worthy successor for One For All. You failed me. I can't believe it, young Midoriya. The fact that I gave my quirk to a villain." Immediately, everything in Midoriya's head starts to crack. Those little cracks in his mind start to form bigger and bigger until it finally shatters, and Midoriya just starts laughing. He says, "Oi, old man, you know what? Go ahead and take your fucking quirk and shove it up your ass while you're at it." He takes a piece of his hair out, and he hands it towards All Might, and he says, "Also, when you find out it's not me, don't ever beg me for forgiveness. Don't ever give me this quirk back, and don't ever look at me. I treated you like a father I never had, but you treated me as if I was nothing but scum when it really counted." Immediately, All Might snatches the hair and eats it. He looks into Midoriya's eyes, and he feels slightly guilty and thinks maybe he might not have done it. But then he thinks, no, that was him in the security cameras. It had to be him. He immediately waits a few hours. After a few hours, 2 guards and an armored truck appear outside of UA. All Might immediately throws Midoriya all the way into the truck and says, "Go ahead and take the filthy animal to Tartarus and put him down." Once Midoriya heard that, he started thinking in his mind, wait, put me down? Isn't Tartarus supposed to, lock up villains? He starts to say it out loud, but then All Might just says, "Yes, but we're giving you the execution death penalty. After all, you know about One For All, and if that information goes out to the public, or if you tell some villains, or if anyone ever escapes, then that would put me in a bad situation," is what All Might says while looking at Midoriya, who's getting up, trying to rush out of the door, but the door's closed in front of him. He immediately starts banging on the back of the door, on the armored vehicle, banging on the door, saying, You bastard! You mean you're gonna kill me, all for a secret? Really? Is that really that important to you? While All Might says, yes, it's generations upon generations of separate heroes that have not wanted the information to go down, and if it does, it'll cause a riot, a pandemic, all over the world of people that want to have the quirk, or people who say it's unfair. So, on behalf of all the One For All users, when I say, please die, he bows mockingly towards Midoriya as he's being hauled off in the armored vehicle. As the guards get in and start driving him away, he screams on top of lungs, I'll get revenge on you, All Might. I swear it. He starts to scream it over and over, while All Might just says, yeah, whatever. You're quirkless now. Not like it's gonna matter anyway. Even if you survive, you would never get revenge on me. You'd never become a hero. Hell, you're not even a competent villain. He immediately walks away, while Midori is being driven away. And everyone in Class 1A is quite distressed and quite in despair of how one Izuku Midoriya was a notorious traitor. Izuku, who's currently in the back of the armored vehicle, is thinking about what to do. What can he do? He's got to get out of this situation somehow. But as luck would have it, while the guards are driving, a black cat appears across the road. Immediately, the guards start to run it over. But right when they run it over, the dead body bumps upwards. And the tire, once the vehicle bumps upwards a little bit, once it goes back down, it lands into a pothole, causing one of the tires to pop. But that's not all. When the tire pops, and they're still driving, and they're trying to stop the vehicle, it literally flies all the way off to the side, and it crashes into a tree. On the way going to Tartarus, they end up crashing into a tree that was in a forest, and both of the guards die, while Izuku Midoriya flies all the way out of the armored vehicle into the front seat, right directly at the metal door in front of him, and his head does a sickening crunch, and it explodes through the sheer impact of his skull hitting the metal in front of him, the metal vehicle in front of him, the part of it in front of him. Immediately, he falls to the ground, but something odd happens. His head starts to reform, and he starts to get up, and he's wondering, why the hell am I not dead? That's all for now, and I may be redoing this later. Also, thank you Twilight Knight for giving me this idea. I might have butchered your name. I'm sorry.